Afternoon. Today is February 17th. This is the Government Operations and Ethics Subcommittee of the Government Labor and Elections Committee. We're having a work session today. I am Delegate Ken Kerr, the chair of the subcommittee and vice chair of the committee. So this is our first work session of the subcommittee for the session. For those of you who are new to this system, let me just quickly explain what's going on here. These bills have all had hearings, and we bring them to subcommittee just to make sure that we have answered all of the questions that came up during the hearing. If there are any amendments to be offered, we discuss these here. This committee, if it feels satisfied that this bill is ready to be presented before the full committee, will then issue a favorable vote, a recommendation that it goes to the full committee, where we will then present any information that came out during this meeting, and the full committee will then take a vote, and the bill will subsequently go on to the floor for a second read. Today we'll be taking up 4 bills in the following order: House Bill 264, House Bill 261, House Bill 147, House Bill 193, and then House Bill 74. We are joined by committee counsel Tyler Babich, who is here to explain the bills and answer any questions related to the draft of the bill. And we will go ahead and get started with 264. Tyler, can you remind us what this bill is and what it does?
Sure. House Bill 264 is the Maryland Data Privacy and Protection Act of 2026. It's a departmental bill from DoIT, and it makes a number of changes, including the limits to the personal information that can be collected, maintained, and processed by units of state government, and requires certain personal information be deleted or de-identified. Excuse me. And it also requires the Department of Information Technology, DoIT, to establish additional security requirements in applicable contracts.
Thank you. There were 14 witnesses at this bill hearing. They were all favorable. There was no opposition. And I don't see anyone here from the Department of Information Technology today. But does anyone on the committee have any questions regarding this bill, or would anyone like to make a motion to advance it to the full committee?
I'll move favorable, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. We have a favorable and a second. Any more discussion on this bill? I'll go ahead and call for a vote then. All in favor of moving House Bill 264 onto the full committee with a favorable report from the subcommittee, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you. We'll move on to House Bill 261, and Tyler.
House Bill 261 is the competitive proof of concept bill from the Department of General Services. It establishes competitive proof of concept as its own procurement method. Right now, it exists as sort of a companion to existing procurement methods, and so it's separated as its own method, which would enable the department to work with vendors to test out innovative products and test out how new solutions that maybe units of government aren't aware of yet, test them out and see how they would work in a real world environment, and evaluate which ones best meet the needs of the unit before the unit commits to a complete contract for the service or product that is being tested.
I don't see any amendments or changes to this bill. Tyler, is that correct?
I'm not aware of any.
Okay, and if you recall from the bill hearing, there were 4 witnesses testifying, all in favor, and a couple of written testimonies. Is anyone here from Department of General Services who would like to make any comments on this bill before we have discussion with the subcommittee? Is that what you're here for, John?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Yes.
go ahead. What would you like to say?
This is our sole administration endorsed departmental bill following on the successful passage of the Procurement Reform Act last session. And this is a simple bill to address a fairly complex topic, but 2024 legislation passed that left a gap in the ability to really fulfill the use of a competitive proof of concept procurement method as a fully fleshed out form of procurement for these innovative technologies and IT projects. And so the bill fills that gap by amending the statute and will allow us to proceed with this innovative procurement method.
Thank you. Delegate Chisholm.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Is there any cap on the dollar amount? And the reason I ask that is wondering if there's any, like, it would be great if there's like some sort of a legislative notification above a certain amount. I don't think it's in the bill. I looked, but I was just curious if that was, I don't remember if that was discussed in committee or not.
John, do you recall, or is do you understand what the Delegate Chisholm's getting at, and is it necessary?
Yes, and I do have some Office of State Procurement subject matter experts on the call as well, but I can say that the Procurement Reform Act last year increased thresholds as it relates to the Board of Public Works is ultimately approving these procurements, and so the thresholds are addressed elsewhere in statute that apply to small procurements and essentially large procurements. And so this bill doesn't propose to introduce any new thresholds with regard to IT or innovative procurements. So the same thresholds that apply to other procurements would apply.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Delegate Chisholm. Ms. Bond, did you want to add anything to that?
I just wanted to say that what we're trying to do is just remove the barriers we currently have for full implementation. So there is no threshold per se, but like John has explained, we are just following exactly the same thresholds that apply for BPW. What we are doing though is we're adding the requirement for CPO approval for all of the proof of concept contracts. So there's 2 levels, CPO and also do it for the IT related requirements. So from our perspective, that kind of meets the due diligence requirements.
Thank you. Any other discussion on House Bill 261? Does anyone want to move favorable on 261?
Move favorable.
Second.
Okay, we have a favorable and a second. Is there any further discussion on this bill? I'll call for a vote. All in favor of moving House Bill 261 on to the full committee with a favorable report from the subcommittee, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, we will move on then. Thank you. Let's move on to House Bill 147, Tyler.
House Bill 147 would take the nonprofit navigator within the Department of Commerce, which is currently in a pilot program stance, and make it a permanent post.
Is Delegate Gazzoni or anyone here to speak on this bill? Anyone from the subcommittee have any questions on this bill? Tyler, there was some talk about an amendment to simply extend the sunset on this because next year is already funded. Has that gone anywhere yet?
I've not seen any amendments, and I can't speak to the funding specifically, but if you want, we can hold it for now. I can look into that.
Okay, I think it's best to hold it so we can clarify that.
Sure.
With no objections from the committee. It looks like things. Oh, Delegate Tomlinson, go ahead.
So I just want to make sure I understand what you just said. So so right now the bill would take a position that's temporary, make it permanent, and but you're proposing, or you're saying there might be an amendment to just extend the sunset. Is that what you're saying?
There may be, simply because there is a bit of a fiscal note on it, and we don't know exactly what the financial situation looks like for approving uh, these fiscal notes under $100,000. So
Yeah.
just being a little cautious here. But we're not in a time crunch at this point that we have to go ahead without getting further clarification if that's the way that leadership wants to move.
Okay. I was just trying to make sure I understood what you're doing.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
thanks.
appreciate the question. All right, then let's just hold this till next week, and we will check in with Delegate Gazzoni just to make sure what her preferences are for this bill. Then let's move on to the most interesting bill of the day, House Bill 193.
House Bill 193, sponsored by our very own Vice Chair, Delegate Kerr, does a handful of things regarding state procurement. The bill makes changes to change orders and contract modifications, most notably if there are any changes in laws that would impact the costs of a procurement, then it changes or opens the door for contract modifications. The bill also gets into procedures for bid protests and contract claims, debriefings for unsuccessful offerers, and some procurement ethics issues.
Thanks, Tyler. Some of you, Delegate Chisholm, you recall from last year that this went through the House and made it to the Senate, where it was put into a summer work group by Chairman Gazzoni in the Senate, and we did meet throughout the course of the summer to discuss the bill. So there weren't significant changes from last year's bill, but just a few things that were tightened up. John Williams, are you here to talk about this bill today?
Mr. Chairman, we submitted a letter of information referring to the Department of Legislative Services analysis. Our Office of State Procurement had worked closely with you on this bill last session. And so while we did, identify the kind of operational and I would say modest fiscal impacts within bounds of existing resources, I would refer the committee to the letter of information and really don't have anything to add at this point.
Thank you. I had Tyler write an amendment. There was some concern from DLS about that the bill is a little ambiguous about state law versus federal law. And so we do have an amendment that was distributed today to all subcommittee members to specify that it only applies to state law. Tyler, do you have the text of that amendment with you? Can you read the salient point? Okay, you're muted if you're talking to us. Didn't know whether you're just talking to
So
yourself.
just on page 4 is where the bill gets into the contract modification issues, and it would be in lines 8 and line 14, and just before the word law, you would just insert the word state.
Oh, okay.
So in state law. It's a pretty simple amendment.
Yeah.
Here
Okay.
we go.
Thanks. I've got that. John, I had a question that. Oh, okay, good. Yeah. John, I had a question for you. A thought occurred to me about how we might simplify changes in law and avoid having to do the contract modifications. Maybe it's impractical, maybe it's genius. I don't know. Could you help me understand what would happen if Maryland changes a law that affects the cost to the contract awardee during the course of the contract, what would happen if we just said that the changes in law don't apply to an already awarded contract for the length of that contract? Then we wouldn't need to seek a contract modification. We simply wouldn't apply the law to an existing contract. Is that practical or possible?
I would be concerned with the relationship between the state and the entity with whom we're contracting, who would have I think, regular business expectation of a change of law provision that would reopen the contract. Those reopeners can be narrowly tailored to specific sections of a contract, but a blanket bar on reopening during the term of a contract, I think would potentially impede some entities from wanting to do business with the state.
Okay.
Could I ask Ludmilla to comment, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, please, Ludmilla, do you understand what it is that I'm asking?
Yes, and just for your information, I'm coming from the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
Is the contractual contract on the federal acquisition side. And typically, that's what happens on the contract on the federal side is the requirements, the statutory requirements that apply moving forward to new solicitation, new contracts, so that the vendors have an opportunity to structure their proposals in accordance with the requirements. Once we issue a contract, it's locked in, and therefore the changes moving forward don't necessarily apply to that contract without further negotiation. So I think what you're saying is if the statute specifically says it doesn't apply to existing contracts, then that kind of eliminates the need for the contractor to comply with the requirements and for state to negotiate the additional costs.
And this is how it works in the federal government, and it's pretty smooth and seamless.
It's pretty standard, yeah.
Okay. Delegate Chisholm?
I think you just got to what I was going to ask. Can we just amend it to mirror that? Will that solve it? I mean, it's a pretty sweeping piece of legislation, obviously. I'd be curious to know what Mike Johansson has to say about that, because it does seem like it's a sweeping piece of legislation, but it seems like we've already got mechanisms in place. If you're telling me we can go after a contract narrowly focused, what's the purpose of this piece of legislation?
Well, I just thought it would eliminate the need for seeking a contract modification if the new law just simply didn't apply to the contract. The
Correct.
contract would go on. But Mike, do you have some?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my experience, there have been times when new laws have not applied to existing contracts. I remember a contract at MVA that was entered into many years ago, that when the new living wage requirements took into account, they didn't apply to existing contracts. So therefore, there wasn't a need for an equitable adjustment. That kind of made sense. I could also anticipate, let's assume the law requires some change in IT security, which is something that you want everybody to follow. And it could be more of a general application, IT security, which is a good thing. You wouldn't want to preclude that from having an equitable adjustment. So it really, your point kind of comes down to how you word this concept, meaning if the law changes and if it is going to apply, then the contractor wants the right to equitable adjustment. If when the General Assembly passes the law or the agency interprets the law to say it's not going to apply to an existing contract and there's no new requirement, then there wouldn't be an equitable adjustment anyway, right? So I think you could get somewhere with your concept. I would just want to look at the language to make sure a contractor is not missing out on the opportunity if they actually are subject to a new burden.
Okay, so it's not as straightforward and simple as I think it is.
It could be, depending on the words.
Delegate Tomlinson?
So I'm just trying to make sure I understand. So you're proposing that it wouldn't, you're proposing that it would only, that this would only apply to, what's the effective date on this? July or October? July. So you're saying, what you're proposing is to make it clear that this would only apply to contracts that are awarded after July 1st.
Yes.
And any future laws we pass.
And yeah, but what I'm saying is if a contract was awarded in 2024 and it has a contract life going through 2027, if this year we make a law that would change the terms of the contract, that law would not apply to that 2024 contract through 2027.
Yeah. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
But if a new contract was entered into after July 1st, then obviously this would apply. So it applies to, I don't know, Tyler, were we thinking it applies to existing contracts or just contracts going forward?
That had been one of my questions, and so I think that's one of the things that you'd wanted to work out in subcommittee.
You froze up on us.
Yep. I think that's something that you'd wanted to work out with the subcommittee.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but generally when we pass laws, they're not retroactive unless we specifically say that it's going to be retroactive, right?
Yeah, I know that it kind of complicates things more than I want to complicate them. Mike, what do you think?
So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think the purpose of the bill was an existing contractor who agreed to do 10 things, priced out those 10 things. If a new law passes and now he has to do an 11th thing, whether it's a contract that he had 3 years ago or he gets next year, you want the protection of an equitable adjustment if that new legal standard applies. So I don't know that you need to change this bill. I think what it means, if, for example, the General Assembly were going to pass a family leave bill, which is already passed, I'm just using an example. When you pass the family leave bill, you should determine when you pass that new burden, which may affect existing contractors, whether you want existing contractors to comply with the new family leave requirement. If you do, when you pass the bill, then you're basically understanding that you're going to have to go in and give equitable adjustments to any contractor who's affected by that new burden. So you can either address it somehow in this bill, which I'm not sure meets what the proponents would like, or when you pass a new burden, a bill that has a new burden that may apply to contractors, you make a determination whether you want that new benefit or good or whatever it is to apply to existing contracts.
As it's written now, Tyler, does it apply to existing contracts?
Yes, a contract that is in place now and is still in place, if it's in place for a few years, so it's still in place after this bill goes into effect.
Okay.
Then the General Assembly passes something that would raise the cost of the contract, then the vendor could seek a contract modification.
Correct.
So, Mike, if the process of seeking a contract modification, how burdensome is that and on the contract holder? Like, am I trying to fix a problem that it's not that big of a problem? To seek a contract modification, is it a fairly straightforward thing?
It's not that big of a problem.
Okay.
The agencies listen, for a contractor, it's not a burden to say to the contracting officer, there's a new requirement that's going to take effect October 1st. We believe this increases our cost, and we didn't contemplate this cost when we bid 3 years ago. Since the state of Maryland, because now you're limiting it only to state law changes, you, the state of Maryland, pass a new burden, I think you, the state, should adjust my price or time of performance or however else it changes. It's not a burden on the contractor to seek that. I think from a DGS perspective, they may get, several of these, and I don't know how they would administer it, but if it's a similar, let's assume it's family leave again, just to use it as an example, there could be 10 contract change requests, all relating to family leave. I don't know that it's a burden for the agency to then figure out their methodology for addressing it.
Okay, thanks for that. That helps a lot. Delegate Tomlinson?
Yeah, and DGS can certainly speak to this as well, but yeah, I mean, there will be a lot of work on the state side without a doubt. Modification. So any modification that is over 50,000, and depends on what contract we're talking about. I know we keep using the example of the family leave. I don't know if that would get a single contract. It depends. It all depends on the contract, but any modification over 50,000 does require going to the Board of Public Works, which does involve a significant amount of work on the state's behalf. So yeah, there's certainly, this will certainly result in a lot of modifications, and I mean, the bill is absolutely pro vendor, pro business. I guess it's just trying to strike that balance of I guess workload on the state and the cost that comes with that workload to the state. And obviously there's a cost with all these modifications. But yeah, I mean, it certainly will. Modifications take time to process and to get executed.
So are you suggesting that we kind of explore this idea far further about just having the new law not apply rather than seeking a contract modification? Or are you agreeing with Mr. Johansson that probably we just go ahead and seek the contract modification, that it's not that egregious?
I mean, whether this applies to existing contracts or just contracts awarded after July 1st, I mean, either way, modifications will be needed to actually execute the equitable adjustments. So there'll be modifications either way, but I guess it's more just a question of, do we want it to retroactively apply or not?
All right, then let's just do this. Is there a motion on the amendment that makes it apply only to the state?
Move the amendment.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed to the amendment? Okay, now on the bill as amended, does anyone want to move the bill as amended with the simple amendment?
Move favorable as amended, Mr. Chair.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the amended bill. Any further discussion on that, Delegate Tomlinson?
Yeah, I had a couple things I wanted to bring up or get some clarification on. And Tyler, I'll probably need your help on this. With page 2, with the section on debriefings. This, I believe this is currently, so is there currently nothing in the statute about debriefings? I know in COMAR and regulation there is. And so I guess my question about what we're changing with debriefings, are we basically just taking what's in regulation and putting it in statute, or something different?
Mike Johansson, do you have an answer for Delegate Tomlinson on the enhanced briefings?
Yes, and unless Mr. DeShiel wants to jump in, which he doesn't appear to be at his desk, but I believe this is probably a somewhat broader description of the information that is to be provided. If you look at, I guess it's page 2, line 15, it's a debriefing of all the information related to the procurement that is not confidential, proprietary, or privileged. Today, what we typically see is a procurement officer only providing information that is very limited. And basically what they say is, if you want any more information, you're going to have to protest and wait till you get to the appeal board in order to get anything more. What that means to someone who is in a debriefing, which means they didn't win the contract, there's often more appeals that are filed in an effort to get that information. Then they can withdraw the appeal once they see that they lost fair and square. But the debriefing material is so limited, this bill actually would provide more of that information at time of debriefing so that the vendor can make a real decision whether or not it makes sense to appeal.
Gotcha. Okay. And I see that there's a time frame for when the procurement officer that says that they need to provide the debriefing as soon as feasible after receiving the request, but then before the recommended contract award is presented for approval to the head of the unit or the board. Makes sense. But I don't see that there's a timeline or a number of days where the unsuccessful offer is able to request a debriefing. And the reason I bring that up is because you could end up with this, if there's not a timeline here, my fear is that you could end up with a situation where the contract is going to the board. Tomorrow there's a board meeting, for example, board public works meeting. If there's no cutoff, my fear is that what if an unsuccessful offer, if the award was going to the board tomorrow, could an unsuccessful offer ask for a debriefing today on Tuesday, and then we have to, possibly hold up the contract going to the board tomorrow. So should we maybe entertain saying that putting in like a number of days from when an unsuccessful officer learns that they're not getting the contract, that they can request and they're owed a debriefing, but just throw a number of days in there?
Yeah, as a general rule, an entity that loses, right, they're not the winning bidder, only has 7 days from the date they knew or should have known to file a protest. So typically, bidders that lose are very interested in requesting a debriefing right away. And if you waited till right before it went to BPW, I think they could say that your debriefing request is untimely. And I'm looking at the rest of this section to see if it mentions it anywhere prior to subsection H. But in my experience, no one would ever wait for this thing to get that close to BPW approval before you even request a debriefing.
So, would it make sense to just tie the time you have to request a debrief, not to get a debriefing, but to request a debriefing with the number of days you have to file a protest?
I think having some time is okay. And maybe if that's what 4 said, the Office of State Procurement shall establish guidelines for debriefings, including a time period for an unsuccessful offeror to request the debriefing. That way you don't have to put something in the statute. You can let state procurement decide what that is.
Yeah, I wouldn't have an issue with that.
So in line 19 and 20, after debriefings, just say including, provisions for the timing of a request for the briefing.
To request a debriefing, yeah.
Yeah.
Tyler, do you have that?
Yes, we would include an amendment clarifying in H4 on page 2 that one of the guidelines that the Office of State Procurement would establish is a deadline for an unsuccessful offerer to request a debriefing. I might recommend, since the phrasing of that is the guidelines for the debriefing, might be what goes into the debriefing and not necessarily like the information that's shared, the format of it. I don't know if it's necessarily going to mean the timelines for it. So then we just may want to change up that phrasing a little bit, just broadening it a little bit beyond guidelines. So like procedures and guidelines or something along those lines.
Do you need some time to work on this?
Uh, my advice would be if we wait another week for the bill so that we can see the amendment in writing. I can work with Delegate Tomlinson and you, anyone else who wants to be involved in it, and go over the language. But it's up to you all.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, I'm willing to withdraw my favorable motion.
Well, that we can do a second amendment, so I don't think you need to.
Okay.
We've already adopted the original amendment, limiting it to state law. So
Mhm.
that issue is clarified. This is a separate issue, but thank you, Delegate Lehman. Okay. Delegate Tomlinson, does that work for you?
Yeah, that I think the amendment sounds good.
I think the bill's in good shape. And if we decide to go ahead with this, give Tyler a little bit more time to get the amendment right, and we'll just we'll put it early on next week's agenda and deal with it then.
Okay.
We only have a couple of minutes, and so
Yeah.
let's hold this bill till next week and move on to House Bill 74. Is anyone here to speak to House Bill 74? I don't see the sponsor or the chief advocate in the room. Okay, one more call for House Bill 74. All right, seeing that no one's here to speak to that bill, we'll put that bill on next week's agenda as well. Thanks, everyone, for a really great discussion. I think that the subcommittee now has a good understanding of this bill and what it does, and I know we're just trying to make it stronger at this point, and we'll see if we can do that over the course of next week. And with that, let me go ahead and adjourn the meeting. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.